Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Concerts That Made Us. I'm your host Brian and I'm here to guide you through the next hour of concert experiences. But before we get into it, rate and review us on iTunes and find us and follow us on social media. Just search for Concerts That Made Us. Now, my guest this week is Ivan Bodley, aka Funkboy. But before we get talking to Ivan, we're going to take a listen to some of his music. So, without further ado, let's get on with the show.
1, 2, 3.
Hi, Ivan. You're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us this evening.
Man, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
It is. It is. I'm really looking forward to hearing your concert stories now. I bet you've got some great ones.
I got a few. Yeah, I got a lot. Yeah.
So, before we get into it, would you like to tell the listeners a bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Why not? My name is Ivan Bodley. Some people call me the Funk Boy. I'm a freelance, full-time professional musician based out of New York City, New York. I've been looking at the business end of a Fender bass for about 30 years full time now, and probably about 40 years, since I'm in high school, kind of thing. I haven't had a day job since 1995, so something must be working out. I keep paying the rent with it. I managed to buy an apartment in Queens, if you can imagine that.
Jeez.
Based on proceeds just from playing weddings and funerals and bar mitzvahs from here to the Orient and back. I've worked with, I guess the tagline in my bio is I've performed with 50 inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've appeared as a substitute player on stage in 12 different Broadway musicals. I'm a Blues Hall of Fame inductee here in New York, and I enjoy what I do. I enjoy concerts from being in them and from consuming them, being in front of them, both.
That's one of the most impressive intros I've had now on the show so far.
If I do say so myself, that's kind of rude, right?
How do you fit so much into one lifetime so far?
Oh boy. It's one foot in front of the other. It's just like when you've been doing it. I mean, literally, I graduated music school 30 years ago next year. So it's just sort of like one gig after another. And I've been averaging, I think this year accepted, the shutdown year accepted, I think my annual average for performances was about 265 per year. So, in that period of time, it starts to add up, and then, as a freelancer, you're constantly working with different people. So, the resume keeps getting longer and longer and longer. And, it's so far, like I say, at the end of every calendar year, I look back and I go, well, I fooled them again. I don't know how, but I'm afraid they're going to find me as an imposter any time now and just kick me out of the union or whatever,
And you decided to put some of your great stories down on paper this year, didn't you? You've got a book out.
I did. It's called Am I Famous Yet? A memoir of a working class rock star, because that's what I consider myself to be. I'm very much a working class rock star. I've done a lot of famous-y kind of stuff, but I don't think I'm particularly famous myself. There's so many stories that I've been telling over the years, like anything that would happen that was sort of untoward on a gig, backstage, or or at dinner break between soundcheck and the show would always remind me of something else that happened that was even more outrageous on another gig. So I would start telling these stories backstage.
Yeah.
And some of my compatriots were like, you need to write these things down. And I did. I started to write them down probably about 4 years ago. I started this thing, and then the pandemic was a great excuse to finally get it finished, get it published, get it out, get the whole thing. And the response has been just lovely. Really good support on it.
Brilliant. I've had a chance to read through some of it myself now, and it's once you start, you can't put it down. Especially if you're a music lover, you want to get to the end of it.
There's a lot of inside baseball kind of stories and a lot of things that, music lovers, is things like you wouldn't believe if you didn't actually know it to be true sort of thing. It's hard to imagine how these things actually happen. And then, I think a lot of the general public doesn't understand sort of the daily machinations we have to go through to sort of, get a concert up, get a show up in front of punters. It takes a lot of traveling and moving, to get it going.
Yeah, I could imagine. So we'll move on to your music tastes. How would you describe your music taste as a consumer?
Very eclectic, because I really truly enjoy a huge range of music. My iTunes library now has over 125,000 tracks in it at the moment. I'm a voracious collector of music, of recorded music. And that's kind of what started me on the entire path, even into being a professional musician, was like, we started as record collecting, vinyl collecting, way back. I've since given up with the vinyl. The only vinyl that I kept are like the autographed ones that I have from like my college radio station days. When in very early days, when I would interview like the Ramones, I would get them to sign. So I have an autographed Ramones album. I have an autographed Red Hot Chili Peppers album. I have an autographed like REM, Jaco Pastorius, Stanley Clarke, all these people. So I kept, a handful of autographed vinyl, but the rest of it, since I decided to go ahead and make the jump to digital, I concentrate in classic soul and funk music. That's sort of like my primary bailiwick, if you will. But there's a whole lot of jazz recorded at Van Gelder Studios in Inglewood Cliffs, the Blue Notes era stuff from the 50s and 60s. I just can't possibly get enough of it. And then literally, I enjoy country music. I enjoy classical music. I enjoy jazz, R&B, funk. I listen to it actively. So I have my areas of specialization, but I have my interests that really span, literally the globe.
Yeah. I think once you're a musician yourself, you're open to every genre. Really, there's not much you'll turn away from.
I agree with that 100%. And I think it was Duke Ellington who said there are only two kinds of music, good and bad.
True.
And that resonated with me very deeply. I was like, yes, because there are fine, you can tell if somebody's got something to say, regardless of the genre that they're trying to say it in,
Yeah. You mentioned moving your music to digital. You wouldn't be one of these people then that think vinyl sounds better?
I love vinyl, and I do think it sounds better. However, I was alive and awake and in the world when there was an invention that came out called the Sony Walkman, which was a cassette player with these ultralight headphones. And I remember first hearing that thing, and I just thought it was a revolution. This is amazing. It's like walking around with a hi-fi strapped to your head. I didn't think anything could possibly sound better. And sort of in my travels and dealing with like recording engineers, I learned a couple of things, like sort of any MP3 sampling rate that's over like 192 is really is almost imperceptible to the human ear to make it sound better. And the sampling rate of a standard sort of MP3 sounds better than, has more audio information available than in the original Sony cassette Walkman. So once I heard that, I'm like, oh, well, I thought that thing sounded great. So I'm good, everything's fine. And now I swear I see people all the time with their smartphone held to their head, listening to something out of this, tiny speaker in the tail of it, which takes us all the way back to like the transistor radio days, when you used to hold the thing to your head, like the same audio quality. It sounds awful, but people enjoy music, even with that, because it's their jam, man. You got to hear your jam, right?
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. So, what was the first record, single, or album you purchased?
Oh, I remember them both, and I can tell you exactly. The first 45 RPM I bought was Sly and the Family Stone, If You Want Me to Stay. The B-side was Babies Making Babies, which I think at probably age 10, I did not understand the concept of that sentiment. But the groove was so infectious, I just was immediately drawn to it. And then the first LP I bought was the Jackson 5's Greatest Hits. So that would have been early 70s sometimes, because they started out in 69, 70, 71, 72. They were really like at the top of the chart. So I would imagine the Greatest Hits package might have been around the 72 era kind of thing. And I was a big fan of the Motown stuff. My mother's record collection was very influential on me. She was a big Gladys Knight and the Pips fan. So she had Gladys records, she had Stevie Wonder records, she had Ike and Tina live at Carnegie Hall. That was a big one. Then she would have like some Beatles and Stones kind of things as well, and a lot of show tune records, like Broadway kind of stuff. But the R&B, the soul records I took to immediately, and especially the early Motown stuff. So it would prove to follow my entire career, my entire life.
Yeah.
I've still been making most of my money playing with Motown and Stax related recording artists to this day.
She really set you up properly for the future. So
absolutely, and without realizing it, there was no agenda on her part. She does just the records that she liked, but the funny thing about her, she liked greatest hits records, greatest hits packages, because they were all good songs on them. Whereas occasionally, if you liked one single off the radio, then the LP would be some filler that would kind of disappoint her. So she knew a greatest hits package was always good value for money.
Sounds like a smart lady.
Absolutely.
And the first concert you ever attended.
Oh, this is a good story, but it could be a better story.
Right.
Because what happened was, the first concert I attended, I think I was 7 years old, and I went to go see Donny Osmond and the Osmond Brothers play at the local college, and the opening act was I'm gonna get this name wrong. It was Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods. They had the big hit was Billy, Don't Be a Hero, Don't Be a Fool with Your Life, Come Back and Make Me Your Wife was the lyric. It was a really odd thing. So in my mind, in my 7-year-old brain, the Osmond Brothers and the Jackson 5 were kind of the same thing to me. It was like a prepubescent lead singer, kind of soul pop sort of oriented kind of thing. So I wasn't sort of like racially or sociologically hip enough to know that there was a gigantic difference, because in my world, music was music kind of thing. So the first, and I later met Donny Osmond when I worked at the record label. He came up to, I think the label was courting him at the time, Epic Records, and I was able to tell him, I said, listen, man, you were the first concert I ever saw. He's like, get out of here. Come on, man. I was like, but the reason why the story could be even hipper was because very shortly before that, my mother had asked me, she knew I was a big fan of the I Can Live Carnegie Hall record, right? Because I would play it in a house. So Ike and Tina were coming to Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I grew up. And she said, do you want to go see Ike and Tina Turner? And I said, nah.
Oh, man.
I didn't know. Like, my first concert story could have been so much hipper than it was. Like, yeah, Ike and Tina, man. No, it's the Osmond Brothers. That's my first concert experience. Well,
it's still an experience.
Yeah. Without a doubt. And I saw many, many, many hipper shows after that. But, and I don't fault the Osmonds. I thought they were great. I think Merrill Osmond is one of the great rock singers of our age, believe it or not, And I was a big fan of that genre, that time,
Yeah, yeah. I suppose back then, and, you were the perfect age. They were very teeny boppers, so to speak.
Exactly.
They were targeting kids, teenagers, that genre. So,
yeah, Michael Jackson and Donny Osmond were both just slightly older than me, and as a kid, when you see a kid fronting a huge pop act, you're like, wow, that kind of gives you a sense of place in the world. Like, maybe I could do that,
Yeah.
No, I can't, but, you can identify it with it,
Yeah, yeah. Who would the performer have been that you looked at and thought, I want to do that. I want to be a musician?
I can tell you exactly, because I have very specific memories of that too. There's a couple of things. One, I saw Rick James on an American television show called The Midnight Special. And back in the late 70s, early 80s, there was very little opportunity to see live music on television. It was before MTV. So there were two shows that would come on the weekend, three shows really. Don Kirshner's Rock Concert was one of them. The Midnight Special, hosted by Wolfman Jack, the DJ, right? And then occasionally you'd see a band do a song or two on Saturday Night Live. And that was pretty much it. Like, the very few opportunities to see live music. So Rick James played on the Midnight Special, and he had a single out at the time called You and I. And it was just sort of this ostinato bass line was like down, 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 and it's just this four notes that kept repeating on only two strings of the bass. And a friend of mine who I was going to high school with had a bass in his dorm room that only had two strings on it. It only had the E string and the A string on it. And I was able to pick out that bass line just on this bass that only had two strings on it. And I was like, it immediately sort of started coming to me. I was like, this might be a thing. This might be something I could actually do. And I remember being heavily influenced by that. I also saw the band Mother's Finest, if you know those guys. They're celebrating, I think they're celebrating their 50th or 51st anniversary this year. They kind of invented the genre funk rock in the 70s. It was a primarily African-American band, but also mixed race. Actually, that's not true. The drummer and the keyboard and the drummer and the guitar player were both white cats. So what they did was they kind of combined, they were famously sort of combined a Led Zeppelin riff, which is called Custard Pie, you know, but they sang Smokey and the Miracles, Mickey's Monkey, over the Zeppelin riff. So if you can imagine these worlds colliding, and I saw them in Chattanooga opening for the Atlanta Rhythm section, who I love. They were big sort of FM radio kind of, you know, standard. But Mother's Finest, I knew them some from the radio, but I had never seen a show. When I saw the show, they blew the headliner off the stage as far as I was concerned. And at that time, I had just started to play the bass, you know, just kind of started to fool around with it. And I remember seeing their bass player, Wizard, playing, and I was like, I don't know what these guys are doing, but I want to do that. Like, it was so heavy and funky and rhythmic and soulful, and it was just beautiful. And in later years, in recent years, I finally have gotten to work to collaborate with recording with Moses Moe, who is the guitar player from that band. So it was kind of like this life sort of full circle moments. I played on some of his recordings. He's played on some of my recordings. And, you know, it's hard for me not to fan out on him every time I see him. You know, it's like,
I can imagine.
You were like the first guy I ever saw, man. It was amazing.
How does he feel about that? Does it ever get old hearing it, do you think?
I don't think so. I think, you know, he knows he's been around a long time, and he's influenced a lot of people, you know, like that band really went through a period of time where they were quite famous in like the United States on FM radio, and also like in Europe. They were on that show Rock Palace in Germany. So like I have some German and Austrian friends who like worship Mother's Finest because they were huge in the 70s, you know, kind of thing. And they're still doing it. They're still touring. They're still rocking. So Mo is a friend, but he's also like, you know, a hero as well.
Yeah. Geez, that's a great thing to be able to say. One of your heroes is a friend as well.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've made friends with a few of my dear heroes. Stanley Clark is another one. I'm a friend with Stanley for 35 years now, and Sam Moore from Sam and Dave, you know, I was his music director for 13 years. So not only is I a huge fan, but he's like a second dad to me, you know. Shirley Alston Reeves from the Shirelles, you know, I've been touring with Shirley on and off for 27 years. So she's like a second mom to me. I call her, you know, for Mother's Day and call her for her birthday and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's like, sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes, you know, but other times it just can be lovely, because once you sort of get past the fan icon dynamic, you know, they're just people. And if you have opportunity to actually work with them over time, you know, it can be a really lovely relationship.
Yeah. What was the next stage then in your musical career, from say your first concert to playing your first concert? Did you go to music school? Did you form garage bands with friends? What was the next thing you did?
First thing we did was we started a band in high school. There was a springtime high school talent show at my school that every year, and I started playing bass in the fall of my senior year. And by the spring of my senior year, when the talent show was, I was in 3 bands because they needed bass players. So we went up in front of a gymnasium full. This is keep in mind, this is an all boys preparatory school, like what you guys would call a public school, I think, you know. Yeah. And it was sort of like 600 kids who actively just hated me as a person, as a personality. I was not a popular kid at all. You know, I was the weird one. I wasn't athletic. I wasn't a team player. I wasn't into sports. None of that kind of stuff. So like I was doing plays in the theater, and then we played these songs. We played Police covers and Stones covers and Rush covers in front of these, and these kids like were ballistic. They loved it. I was like, are these, do they like me now? Like, what happened? It was a very sudden, very sudden shift of fortune, you know? And I even talk about it in the book a little bit. Like, I think sort of part of me has been chasing that sort of level of acceptance, like ever since. Like, how do I get to that, back to that, or, you know, how do I replicate that sort of level of really adoration, fandom, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of it had to do with high school kids being allowed to be loud, you know, just being in the gym and being allowed to make noise. But still, you know, it feels good when you're on the receiving end of that noise.
Yeah.
If it's positive, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Especially as you said, you weren't one of the popular kids. So then when, you know, they turn around and they love you, you won them over with the music.
Amazing. Instant reversal of fortune, you know. And I think it lasted about 2 days, of course, because then, you know, they went back to trying to beat me up like the week after that. But the rest of my life sort of is spent on stage trying to chase that thing. And then I did not go straight to music school, no, because I just started playing as a senior in high school. So I went to engineering school down in New Orleans, really. I was like a biomedical engineering major for 2 years. And then I ended up switching I got a psychology degree. But mostly what I was doing in New Orleans was majoring in college radio. I was at my campus radio station. I was the music director of that station. So that's how I met all the people who came through town that were promoting shows, and I would interview them on the air. That's why I have the autographed records that I mentioned earlier. So my music studies were autodidactic at that point. I was self-taught, and I don't even think I was taking lessons anymore when I went to school. But I was going to see, and this is again seeing concerts. I went to go see the Neville Brothers Band about once a month because they were always playing around at Tipitina's or Jimmy's or other clubs in town. It was such an unbelievably great experience to see them. So I kind of studied at their feet, like watching them, listening to them at the Meters, when the Meters would reunite and play. You know, I would study at the feet of George Porter Jr. I'm just looking up at him. I'm stealing all of your licks. Everything you're playing now is going right into the computer, and it's going to become my vocabulary from now on. And I was thinking, I'm wearing my Neville shirt now. I don't know if you can see it. It's my Neville Brothers shirt.
Oh, cool.
But like, so it was the kind of thing, and I was believe me when I say this, I was no Romeo in college at all. I was no kind of like, you know, dating athlete at all. But I do remember the few times that I actually would take a date to go see the Neville Brothers Band because of the dancing and the, I don't know, the groove or the vibe or something. There was always going to be some kind of physical contact after the show. It was like, I don't know, they were like, this band was like an aphrodisiac on top of the fact that I just love them anyway, you know.
Yeah.
And Aaron Neville just turned 80 years old a couple of weeks ago, and he's a friend of mine. He's a pal. Like, you know, he gets in touch with me on Facebook Messenger just about every day with a Jesus prayer or a dirty joke or something.
Oh man, that's amazing. That is amazing. We'll go ahead to your very first concert that you played. So,
so the first thing I did was the high school talent show. That was kind of the first thing up in front of people. Then when I went to New Orleans, I started working in some original bands. So we would play sort of the general nightclub circuit around. But the first kind of legitimate thing that I did was I got a job backing up in a pickup band, Bo Diddley. Bo came through New Orleans like 3 different times during that period, and he was just traveling by himself, so he was using local bands wherever he was going. And at the time, I think I was dating the booking agent, and I was like, listen, you got to get me on this gig if it's possible. So I had to go audition for the gig. But the thing about Bo, his music harmonically is very simple. Most of his songs are like 1 chord each, and he plays the guitar with an open E tuning. So you know what the rehearsal involved was: if he puts a capo on the 3rd fret, you're in G. If he puts a capo on the 5th fret, you're in A. And if there's no capo, you're in E. End of rehearsal. That was it. That's all you needed to know. And, you know, you need to have sort of kind of a reasonable feel. So I was able to kind of go bump, she bump, she bump, bump, bump all night. He played a 90-minute show of these 1 chord songs, and it was amazing. He was never boring for a second. It was entertaining. He was a great showman. He was a huge personality. And I got to do it like 3 different times when he came through town. So that was like, he wasn't in the Hall of Fame yet, but he became the first Rock and Roll Hall of Famer who I was able to claim as such, having backed up.
Yeah. Jeez, that really marks you out as a legend now. If you can play a one chord song and not be boring, you can still be entertaining.
I've never seen anybody do it before or since. Like, he's the only guy I knew that could do that. And it was, for me as a sideman trying to survive the gig, I was happy. I'm like, great, I only have one chord to worry about. I don't have the chord changes. Like, I'm not trying to second guess anything. But then sort of as you're looking back at it as an audience member, I was like, that was a 90-minute show of one chord songs that were fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. It was amazing.
Like, in recent years, there's people on the internet giving out that most pop songs nowadays are just the same 3 chords.
Right.
You could probably play all of them if you know 3 chords. Imagine if someone came out with a one chord song nowadays, they'll lose their minds.
There's so few and far between, but they happen once in a while. Like, there's a thing that'll just kind of be this one sort of gem that'll just sit in this one. There's a famous one, Sonny and Cher, and the beat goes on, la-di-da-di. It's one chord, C. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's the whole song. It's one chord, And now, what I think about it now, what's more likely to happen is if it's kind of a hip hop sample. So they'll take a sample and it just kind of be a groove and a bass line, and it's basically like one piece that repeats over and over again. So then, what you're saying has to become the thing.
Yeah.
And you really need to have some routines. You need to have some rhymes down to sort of make a one chord production sound like it's going somewhere,
Yeah, exactly. We'll fast forward a bit. The last gig you played, so.
Last gig, well, again, we have to fast forward through. We just came through COVID time. So what happened over here was basically June 1st. It was like a light switch went on, and all the private party work that had been silent for 15 months suddenly came back. So I've been playing private parties. I've been playing weddings, dinner dances. I say weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs. That's sort of my running joke of what I do. So yeah, since June 1st, I've been every Saturday and some weekends. So last Saturday, I did Saturday and Sunday. I did 2 weddings. So it's all function band, private party bands. In New York, they call them club dates. In Boston, the same band. And I know in London, they call function bands. In Boston, they call them general business bands.
Right.
In LA, I think and in Nashville, they call them formal gigs. And then in LA, they call them casual gigs. Same gig, but they just have like a different nomenclature in the different parts of town. So yeah, I spent, you like do an hour cocktail hour, and then you do like, you do the first dance and the parent dances, and then you do like some dinner music. And then the last 2 hours is like bang, 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 trying to keep the dance floor filled for 2 hours. So there are no endings. Like, everything is one long medley for the entire night,
You really need to be on point for that. So it must have been pretty amazing and refreshing to be able to get back out on stage again after such a long time with no music.
Unbelievable. I mean, I've been recording and practicing at home sort of all through the lockdown to try to keep myself sane. But yeah, to sort of, and I had 3 or 4 gigs like over the year, like spread out every 2-3 months or something. A gig would happen, and you'd play, and you kind of be reminded, like, oh yeah, we used to know how to do this. I used to do it 5 nights a week, and now the biggest thing was sort of like reclaiming your stamina, because these gigs, especially the function gigs, the wedding gigs, typically 4 to 5 hours. So you really have to make sure your back is strong, make sure you're well hydrated, all that kind of stuff. So I felt pretty good about it. It's funny sort of seeing sort of my other compatriots as they come back, because some of them didn't play much over the last 15 months. So you can see them by the end of 4 hours, they're hurting, they're sore, everything hurts.
They need to go to a chiropractor the next day, I imagine.
Well, if you can imagine standing with, a bass guitar is about a 10-pound piece of lumber strapped to your stomach, so you can imagine what that does to your posture after 5 hours, much less your shoulder, your traps. Like, I got one trapezoid muscle on my left side is like much bigger than my right, because that's the way I hold up the guitar on that side,
Yeah, you're going to feel it after a couple of hours if you're not used to it. When you're playing these gigs, do you prefer smaller audiences or a massive audience? What are you more comfortable with?
I'm fine either way. I have a sort of not a mantra, a credo, I guess. And I've spoken about this with several of my compatriots and associates and colleagues. We play every gig as if we're playing Madison Square Garden, and by that I don't think that we mean that we're playing to the rafters, but we're trying to bring our A game to whatever it is.
Yeah.
So even if it's a duo gig in a restaurant and you're being ignored by all but one table or something, you still want to play to the best of your ability, and you also want to interact with your music partner as much as possible. So what I'm into is anytime the audience and the band are sort of in synergy, like we're on the same page. They're enjoying us, we're enjoying them. And that can happen at a wedding, it can happen at a restaurant, it can happen at Madison Square Garden, and the opposite is true. It cannot happen at Madison Square Garden. You can walk out and just be, universally loathed and hated. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot every time you go out, but the more experience you have and the more you surround yourself with people who also have similar experience and abilities, the more often you're going to be able to at least, have a B+ evening.
Yeah.
At worst,
Yeah. This'll bring us nicely on to what's the worst experience you've ever had while playing a gig?
Oh boy. Well, I'll defer this on slightly to somebody else's gig first, because the worst thing I've ever seen on stage happened to the punk band The Exploited. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're very famous mostly for their logo.
Right.
So it's a skull with a mohawk in profile, right? That says The Exploited underneath. And there's every kid who was ever a punk rocker has had like an Exploited patch on their jeans or their jacket. You know what I mean? Like I think more people have seen the logo than have ever heard the band. Right? So somewhere in the, I'm going to say mid 1980s, and this was sort of in my college radio days when I was attending a lot of punk rock shows. I was even hosting a punk rock a radio show at the time as well. I went to the Ritz in New York City, which is a classic old concert venue that holds, 1,500 people, something like that. And the opening act was somebody like Murphy's Law or Black Flag or somebody, one of these really speedy American hardcore bands. They're just like, high energy, people stage diving. It was the whole thing. So The Exploited at that point in their life had decided that the album that they were promoting was kind of almost like dirge-like heavy metal sounding. It was like gong, 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 gong. It was really heavy and dark and menacing, but it was nothing like the super fast punk rock stuff that the crowd had just witnessed before and probably was expecting from this band from England that they're excited to see. So slowly, just piece by piece, like suddenly like somebody would wad up a plastic cup that they'd just finished their beer in and like toss it on the stage.
Right.
And then like it was like a rainstorm starting. It was like one drop and then two drops and then three drops. And finally, the band is getting pelted by rocks and garbage. It's just like it's a hailstorm of crap coming up. And at one point, a full beer catches the singer right in the face. It's like, whoosh, and he's like, whoa, and it shook him. And he's like, okay, all right. But they're pressing on. There are only 3 songs in the set. And it's going. It's the worst possible thing. And finally, a full beer landed on the guitar player's effects pedals and just shorted it out. It was just like, the guitar just went, done. Thank you. Good night. And they just slunked off stage, literally pelted by rocks and garbage and full beers. Like I've never seen before or since a band physically booed off stage. Like you have to go now. I know we paid to get in here, but we want you to go. You're the headliner. You have to go away. Yeah, it was amazing. I was shocked and highly amused to witness it. I didn't have to throw anything. I was just like, this is great. This is fun.
Sit back with your popcorn.
Oh, it was great. It was fantastic. As far as myself, my own worst experience on stage, that is so hard to say because it's been so many,
Right.
there's innumerable gigs where you've just been either somewhere between ignored or just physically loathed and paid to go home. Like the band's too loud. Here's your money. Get out of here.
Right.
There's a story I tell in the book, like, sort of there's a chapter called What's Your Worst Nightmare? Like what would happen on stage to sort of really embarrass you. The first time I subbed on the Broadway show Hedwig and the Angry Inch, the band is on stage. Everything is memorized. We had some stage business to do. We had some choreography to do. We had a couple of lines. I was singing a bunch of parts. It was only about 9 or 10 songs, I think, but it was a lot that went into it. So it was a lot of pressure, and you still have to play it cool, look like you know what you're doing. And the costume I was wearing, they kind of dressed me up to look like Joey Ramone with a leather jacket with the badges on the lapels and the whole thing.
Right.
I'm wearing aviator glasses, and I'm wearing I had a necklace on that it's what is it? Pewter, silver, like 45 adapter. That center adapter that goes in the 45, that little spiral looking thing. That was the pendant. I was wearing a pendant that had that on it. So toward the end of the show, there's a quote unquote mosh pit scene where there's strobe lights going on, and my job was to go. There's a little mark on the stage, a little piece of tape. So my was to put my heels on that mark and face away from the Yitzhak character while I'm playing. So Yitzhak is like, she is played by Lena Hall at the time. Her job was to run into me like full force, like a slam dance sort of thing, but it's choreographed. So A, I could keep playing my bass, and B, so she wouldn't get hurt. I don't know. She must weigh 90 pounds soaking wet. So she just like rams into me as hard as she can. I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever. But sort of somewhere in the fray, the metal pendant, the pendant I was wearing was on a metal chain. It got wrapped around one of the badges on the lapel of the jacket, right?
Right.
I didn't know this at the time. Not a problem. At the end of the show, my instructions are to put the bass down on the stand, walk up to the front of the stage with the cast, take a bow, go home. That's my instruction. So I've completed the show, and I go to take the bass off, and because the pendant is locked around the badge, the strap of the bass is now physically locked to my body. I can't get the bass off. I can't put down the guitar to complete the show. And I tried to pull the strap off of the strap button and pull it down away from me. And what it was doing was I was wearing in-ear monitors, which have a cable on them. So that was getting tangled in my hair with the pendant. So as I'm pulling it down, it's tightening this knot. So like I'm making it much worse. I cannot get off stage. And also the bass, the other thing you have to know is the bass is it's not a wireless situation. So it's hardwired to the rig. So I can't leave. I'm like, so there's 1,000 people standing, with a standing ovation, looking at me like, what are you doing?
Man.
Can we go home now? The whole band is looking at me like, this is taking an extraordinarily long period of time. And finally the music director said, just bring the bass, come over, bring the bass. So I just kind of slumped over with the bass, and he reached around. I didn't think of this. He reached around and unplugged the bass and set me free, so at least I could exit the stage in my shame. But it was like when we got off stage, we always do an after show huddle, and John Cameron Mitchell, the star who wrote the show, he just looked at me and said, "Now that's rock and roll, man." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, thanks." They thought it was funny. And by the time I got to the stage door, my girlfriend was coming to pick me up after the show, and she had seen somebody who had just come out of the show, and she said, "Oh, I'm here to pick up my boyfriend. He just played bass in the show." And he said, "Oh, did you hear what happened?" Like by the time I'd already gotten to the street, like the incident had preceded me out to 44th Street, so I already like, oh man. So, I mean, that was sort of my greatest public embarrassment. I wasn't too broken up about it because, what are you going to do? But it was potentially could have been something that would have undone someone with lesser experience. You just would have gone home and cried all night.
Yeah. I could imagine. Jeez. It's one of them things, though. You have to see the lighter side of it and take it in your stride, don't you?
100%. And the cast really were amused by it because there was like, it wasn't their problem, it was my problem. And I learned a very important lesson, which is never to wear that pendant again during that show. So I did the show probably 8 or 9 more times without the necklace, and everything was fine, no problem.
Yeah.
Life lessons learned, you know.
How did you actually get into doing shows like that?
Funnily enough, it came to find me. A friend of mine, a bass player named Winston Roy, who's become a dear friend of mine, approached me sort of early on. I was playing a nightclub job down in the village, you know, it was a jam session. I was backing up, you know, whoever wanted to sit in, basically. And I think I was probably making at least $50 for the night. And I had just met Winston previous at a networking function, and he saw me play, and he said, on a break, he said, hey man, would you ever consider playing a Broadway show? I was like, I'm listening, tell me more. Winston was the bass player in a show called Rock of Ages, which ran, you know, it was like the 80s hair rock musical, you know, hair metal musical that ran on Broadway for 6.5 years, I think. So I became one of his subs, one of his deputies, and I subbed on that show, I think 300 times. I think over the course of the show, like I did probably 300 performances. So I didn't really seek it out, but then once it found me, I was like, oh, well, are there other shows that I could sub on? And one by one, you know, I sort of found them. I've done a dozen of them now over the last sort of 10 years. Everything is kind of shut down now, but the last one I was subbing on was the Temptations musical, Ain't Too Proud. And I believe that one's coming back in October, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, if everything goes well, maybe I'll be called to appear on Broadway yet again. But we'll have to see how it goes. So you never know.
How would you? How do you feel about, you know, appearing on Broadway compared to, you know, a normal gig, normal concert?
It's the same but completely different. If you know what I'm saying, like, you know, the Rock of Ages thing. Part of the Rock of Ages thing was you're pretending to do a rock concert for 1,000 people. That was sort of like the gig. The band was on stage. We're in makeup. We're in costume. You know, we're looking like hair metal dirtbags. That was kind of the part we were playing. And we had choreography and lines and the whole thing. So that felt very much like a gig. Just the spontaneity is taken out of it because you're doing a play basically. So you have to sort of say the same things over and over again every night. So there are other gigs that I've had where the band has been on stage. Hedwig was one. The band, there's a Jimmy Buffett musical called Escape to Margaritaville that the band was sort of on this sled that was kind of roll out. And, you know, we were playing the part of like cabana musicians on this resort island. So, I mean, that part of it feels sort of continuous with my other sort of work. The thing that doesn't feel as contiguous is when you're working in the pit, which is when you're underneath the stage, you know, sort of in a dark room with looking at a music stand. And you know that your music's getting out there because you can hear sort of through the wall, you know, there's 1,000 people who are delighted with what you're doing, but you don't sort of have a direct line to them. You're playing on headphones. Spider-Man on Broadway, who's probably one of the most infamous shows on Broadway, with the score written by Bono and the Edge, you know. The band was downstairs in the basement, down the hall, in a room that was just like any generic office building with fluorescent lights and drop ceilings. Right. So we were all on headphones. In fact, I should say the band was actually in 2 rooms. Like the rhythm section was in one room, and down the hall there was like the orchestra room that had the strings and the horns and whatnot. Yeah. So we were all on headphones. We were in the same room with the conductor. And the conductor was looking behind my head. There was a screen that showed the stage. So she could see what was going on the stage and wave her baton and tell us where we needed to go. But, you know, it couldn't have been more. It was like, it wasn't even like doing a recording session, you know, but it was so disconnected from the audience that it just felt odd. It felt odd. Yeah. But, the pit gigs are kind of like that in a way. Like, you know, your stuff's communicating, and especially if you get a chance to see the show from the house, you're like, oh yeah, no, the band is loud. Like, they're hearing everything you're doing. But you kind of have to take it on faith because you're not on stage, you're not performing for anybody. You know, in Spider-Man, you didn't even, you know, like in the pit, if you're in a pit in a Broadway theater in an old house, you have to wear all black because if they can see down in the pit, you just have to sort of be all, you know, in all black. But in Spider-Man, you could have done it in a fluorescent Speedo. It didn't matter. It was like, you know, it's like nobody was going to see you do it. So, whatever you wanted to wear was fine.
I can imagine how strange a feeling it would be, though, because as you were saying, there's a disconnect from the audience. It's like they're hearing your music, but they might never know it's actually your music, if you know what I mean. It could have been anybody.
Oh, 100%. And a lot of people have told me that they're convinced that the orchestra is pre-recorded. The Ain't Too Proud, the Temptations musical, I don't think I'm giving anything away, but at the end of the show, for the finale, the entire cast is on stage, and then behind them a wall goes up, and the entire 20-piece orchestra is on stage. We're all wearing white. We're all wearing white tuxedo jackets and playing white instruments, and we're all performing choreography as well. So every time the wall goes up, the audience just they lose their mind. Like, oh my God, this has been live the whole time. Like they can't imagine that we're just not holding props or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it happened on a couple of shows like that, and it depends how far away, how remote you are from how disconnected you. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I did the Donna Summer musical. I subbed on that for probably, 40 performances a show or so over the course of the run. And at the end of the musical, the way they did the acknowledgement of the band was they had video screens drop down from the ceiling that showed the individual band members playing their parts, which I thought was pretty cool and pretty nice. However, the video screen showed the picture of the person who had the regular chair, not the sub. So there was no way that, I was subbing for a lady named Charisse, who's a tremendous player, really great person. But, it would be Charisse's picture, video on screen, like playing the bass. And then I would pop out the stage door and people were like, who are you? Are you a stagehand? Like, what are you? I'm like, yeah, I just played the show. Never mind.
Oh, man.
I'm not in it for the glory, and that's just fine,
We'll get a bit more upbeat, and speak about the best experience you've ever had while playing a concert.
Well, I think on your questionnaire, I gave you like maybe a top 5 best shows I've ever seen. It would be like Sly and Robbie, the Tom Tom Club, Mother's Finest, The Who, actually. So I got to see The Who in '82. It was amazing. The Neville Brothers, I would put on that list anytime. As far as myself, sort of like some of these peak performances, peak experiences I had, like I said, I was music director with Sam Moore from Sam and Dave on the road for like 13 years. And we played, he's such a hero to so many people who then went on to become rock stars. So like standing next to Sam, I've gotten to meet Bono, The Edge, Springsteen, Sting, Elvis Costello, Paul Rogers, and on and on. Like these people, these however big rock star, Robert Plant, came into one of the things. However big rock stars they are, whatever kind of ego they have nothing next to Sam. They come at him, kneeling before him because he came before them, and he's got this amazing instrument, this amazing first tenor. So occasionally he would have special guests sit in on his shows. So like we played the first Obama inauguration with Sam Moore Band, special guest Elvis Costello and Sting. I'm like, not too shabby for a night's work.
Yeah.
And Sting, that was the second or third time I think we've seen Sting. We've worked with him a few times with Sam. One of the things we got to do that night was we got to play Message in a Bottle, backing him up. He did a couple of songs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I went through the exact playlist of my very first high school talent show ever when I was 17 years old, but one of the songs we played on that night was Message in a Bottle. So then like 27 years later, however long it took, getting to play that on stage with the guy who wrote it and sang it was kind of like, it was very hard to sort of keep my wits about me and just, do my job. But like, we were at rehearsal and he said, I said, we were told he was going to do Message like as a solo guitar thing, like he did famously on the Secret Policeman's Other Ball.
Yeah.
There's a recording of it. He's kind of famous. So we were told he's going to do that. And we rehearsed like Every Breath You Take with him. And I'd written a horn arrangement for it and everything, which kind of made him go like, what? That's hard. But he loved it, And then we got to the Message, and I said, do you want us to back you up on this one as well? He said, do you know it? I said, it's in C sharp, right? He said, yes, it is. And we ended up doing it. I was like, that was amazing. Amazing.
I could imagine. Jeez.
And then there's another big one with Sam, I'll just say quickly, that we played the Tokyo Jazz Festival 2008, 2009, I think. I think we had a 15-piece band. We had like a big horn section, big vocal section, big rhythm section, 5,000 screaming Japanese people. And these are not people that are known to be emotive as a culture, you know, but they were screaming, effusive. The thing was live on national television. The room was elevating, like it was just like bouncing. The whole room was bouncing up and down in time to the music, and the fact that it also got recorded and videoed at the time, you know, was just like, this is as good as it is ever going to get, you know. And thank God the cameras are running and the tape was running. It was great, amazing.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be very hard to top.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. And it's okay, you get to those experiences as they come. Like there was no way to predict it was going to be like this career high of a night. I mean, we kind of knew going to the inauguration gig, like that was going to be a big one. We knew, but even so, you don't really know how it's going to go. Yeah. And then when it then goes well, you're just like, all right, that one goes in the record books. And tomorrow night we're going to be playing, you know, a nightclub in Manhattan for for 3 people, and that's the way it goes, you know. Yeah. Until the next time, basically. Yeah.
Would that be a perfect description of what a working class rock star is then?
I think so. You know, I learned this kind of early on because early in my Bleecker Street days when I was, you know, playing the blues bars and all that kind of stuff, I remember a buddy of mine got the gig with Enrique Iglesias. Right. And he was touring, playing in arenas, you know, so like it was like 15,000 people every night. And then the next time I saw him was right back on Bleecker Street playing a $50 gig. And I was like, note to self, you know, like, don't ever think that you sort of like have outpriced yourself out of a gig, or that you're never going to, you know, I'm never coming here again, or that you're ever going to be too good for something like that. Because A, you're not, you're going to be, you know, every good gig is going to end eventually. And B, if you really love what you're doing, you really just want to play your stupid guitar, you know, and it doesn't really matter where. I mean, it's nice if it's in front of 15,000 people, but it can be just as much fun to be, you know, at the Red Lion pub at 3:00 in the morning, you know, playing some Sly Stone covers. Can be a blast, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that you've played for a lot of rock and roll Hall of Famers, but you also mentioned that you're a blues Hall of Famer yourself. That must have been a pretty amazing experience.
It absolutely was. I was way too young, I thought, to be a member of any Hall of Fame. I was like, this seems to be premature, but I understood why they do it. You know, it was run by, at the time, by a friend of mine named Roxy Perry, who was very active in the New York blues scene, and she was trying to get all of her fellow musicians who were active in that scene recognized, you know. Yeah. So at that time, I'd already backed up like Rufus Thomas and Johnny Copeland and Shamika Copeland, and like I had all these legitimate sort of like high-level blues gigs that qualified me, and I was like, okay, you know, yes, I will accept it, and I'll be. I have the certificates up on my wall somewhere over here. You know, it's a bowling trophy, and it looks good on a resume, and I'm thrilled to be a member of the class of 2011, whenever that happened, you know. Yeah.
I imagine there's some kids starting off playing bass, you know, and especially if they're into blues, if that's their jam, that's something they could be, you know, aiming for in the future. It could be like, I want to be in the Blues Hall of Fame. You know, it's something that'll stick with you for the rest of your life. You'll be known for. It's an amazing achievement.
It is, and I kind of, it almost doesn't feel real to me because, again, like it wasn't something that I was. You can't really set out to do that, or I mean, you can set out to do it, but the fact that you're going to actually make it there or not, it's impossible to say. Like when I started out playing, I knew for a fact I was going to be a jazz fusion bass player. I was going to be just like Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius, right? None of that happened in my life. Not one thing. I've certainly done fusion gigs, but I'm not the kind of player. Those are not the genres I've been employed in most, you know. Yeah. And again, I mentioned before, like Stanley's an old friend of mine, so I've seen his basses. You know, I've played his basses, and they're different setup. They're set up to do what he does. Like they're, you know, he can play really fast and really, you know, really high. And every time I play his bass, I'm like thinking like I I can't get the strings to resonate the way I like them to play, Soul Man or Dancing in the Streets or the things that I get paid to do.
Yeah.
So like I had to realize that, sort of my thing is kind of Memphis, Motown, and Mardi Gras. Those are my things, and the jazz fusion thing is not. Even though I was convinced, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to move to New York and be a fusion guy. I'm like, nope, not at all.
We'll get slightly more personal now. If you could see any, now I know you've met a lot of heroes and you've played with a lot of heroes, but if you could see any performer or band from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
I think one of my greatest heroes who died before I really ever got a chance to see him was James Jamerson, the bass player at Motown.
Right.
And he was known mostly for being a studio performer and more than a live performer, but he certainly did tour with Marvin Gaye. So, and Marvin is another one. Like if I'd seen Marvin or Otis Redding, I never got to see Otis. But I remember like there's some video footage of James Jamerson playing bass live with Marvin Gaye in Washington, D.C. They're touring behind the What's Going On album. And it's just magical. Like just to be able to have seen him do what he does, with his really bizarre technique. He played all those lines with just one finger. For some reason, that's just the way he did things. But I really would have loved to have seen that in person and felt the air moving off of that amp.
Yeah.
I remember seeing John Entwistle with The Who, and Entwistle was another sort of early hero of mine. And when I saw him, I'm standing right in front of him in a stadium. I worked my way all the way down front, and this wall of Sun amplifiers and this alembic bass, and I could see his fingers and see what he was doing and feel the immediate, pressure of off the stage. Not even the PA, it was off the stage. It really was informative as a player to sort of say, okay, I see what that's going on. And to be able to have seen Jamerson do that, I think would have been a whole other, musical gift.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have had, yeah.
That's the perfect word to describe it. It would have been a gift, an experience like that. And if you had to quarantine with an artist for 24 hours in a room, just the two of you, who would it be?
Yeah. I think this is a situation where you have to really be careful about what you wish for. Right. Be careful about meeting your heroes because, as much as I've had positive experiences meeting heroes, I've had negative ones too. So like, you don't know what somebody's personality is necessarily. Even if you love their art, their personality they could be a really prickly kind of human being. You just don't know. But if I had to guess, somebody, I don't know, Stevie Wonder.
Okay.
Like just to be able to talk music with him, I would think that we might have some people like, because I worked on the road for a year as music director with Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. So like we would know some people in common maybe, and have some common experiences to talk about, which might be, something besides just being like, I'm a fan. You're really great, which makes for an awkward conversation,
Yeah. It'd be something he didn't hear every day, so it'd be a good opener for a conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Because I remember seeing a Zoom presentation over the quarantine. They were honoring this gentleman named Paul Reiser, who was one of the arrangers at Motown. And Paul won a Grammy for doing the arrangement for "Papa Was a Rolling Stone," for instance. And he did so many things. And Ray Parker Jr., the guitar player, he was on the Zoom call. And he called Stevie Wonder during the call. He said, "Hey, man, we're on with Paul Reiser." And Paul was one of Stevie's heroes who taught Stevie how to arrange, when he was 13 at Motown. So Stevie on Ray Parker's phone, he's holding his phone up to the Zoom. So like Stevie chimes in, just because he wanted to pay respects to his hero. So like, I feel like I've met enough of those people that perhaps, he and I would have something to talk about that would take us out of that, the fan zone,
Yeah. Speaking of meeting heroes, who has been your favorite person you've met?
Oh, wow. I mean, I have so many like dear friends from doing it for so many years. Like anytime I see Jay Siegel with the Tokens, the guy who sang "The Lion Sleeps Tonight," he feels like family. Shirley Austin Reeves from the Shirelles, she's like I said, my second mom. Sam Moore, like my second dad. I love Gary U.S. Bonds. I love, just like there's so many people that I've seen over the years in different situations. That anytime I see them, Charlie Thomas from the Drifters, I just feel like a personal connection with them. It's a professional thing. We appreciate each other's abilities. They like that I play their show properly. And I love what they've done for American music. Yeah, no, it does help because they use so many pickup bands and so many people who maybe didn't do enough homework, so anytime they can just relax and just do their show and enjoy the audience, then suddenly like I'm their best friend, you guys are great. We love this band. We love you. Everything sounds great. And they're happy. Yeah. So there's just so many of those people that Don Dixon and Marty Jones. John's the great producer who did REM and the Smithereens. And, these are just people like you just call up to just check in with personally after a while, how's it going? Is everything cool? I texted Stanley Clark yesterday was his 70th birthday.
Oh, man.
He started so young and he's been doing it so long, but he's like, that's the kind of guy, if you have a texting relationship with, you're pals, that's a pal thing. That's not a fan thing.
Exactly. And if there was one song that had to appear on the soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
Wow. There's so many. I was trying to sort of think about that and because it would kind of have to be a song that I have a personal relationship and maybe a song that I've even sort of enjoyed playing, as well as listening to. And for me, like maybe two, I can narrow it down to one, but I can give you the sort of in order. Like one sort of my favorite song to play with Martha Reeves and the Vandellas was "Nowhere to Run, Nowhere to Hide."
Right.
Great Motown bass line that just was just the high point of me for the show every night. And probably the one, if I had to narrow it down to one, it would be "I Thank You" by Sam and Dave. So it was like, which also got famously covered by ZZ Top, but the bass line is just, it's a two-note bass line. It's just an octave. And it just sits, it percolates and bubbles in his pocket so beautifully.
Yeah.
And, the lyric is kind of sweet too. It's like, you didn't have to shake it like you did, but you did. And I thank you. It was like, it's all kind of positive. It's slightly suggestive. It's slightly dirty. And it's just so much fun. So every time I hear the song and every time we play the song, it just makes me happy. So yeah, put that one on repeat and I'll be good.
Brilliant. Is there a message you'd like to leave the listeners with?
I don't know. It's funny. I feel like I'm a weird one to get caught giving advice to anyone, but I have been doing it a long time. So people do ask me, it's like, how do you get into show business? How do you meet these people? How do you do it? And I say only half jokingly, if you can do anything else, do that, because show business can be really like, just enormous amounts of heartbreak. Like you have to really have an appetite for eating crap. You have to eat a lot of crap to get to the moments where you can really, express yourself and enjoy yourself. I ran out of options. Like I had a music business career and I finally just kind of hit the wall. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I wanted to be a musician and I really didn't want to do anything else. So once I made that decision and I was kind of realizing like, that's a tough one. Then that's when I went back to music school, make sure all my ducks were in a row, learned my craft, and worked hard enough to whereby when the opportunities did come, then I was able to step into the breach, into them. So like you have to sort of have enough of your skill set together to be able to answer the call when the opportunity does knock. So that would sort of be any advice I would give to people if they're asking. Not that anybody asks, although you just did.
No, that's great advice. Very helpful as well to any budding musicians.
Yeah, cheers.
And where would be the best place to find your music, your book, if anyone wants to find out more about you?
Absolutely. Well, my music is all at color-red.com. That's a label out of Colorado run by the new Master Sounds, if you remember those guys. It's a tremendous label. And I'm just so, that was one of the good things that came out of quarantine. I was doing so much home recording that they asked me to put out my records on their label. I was like, great, that's fantastic. And then the book is available on Amazon in I think every territory. You can get all the links to everything at my website, which is Funkboy, FUNKBOY.net, funkboy.net. It'll take you to Amazon. It'll take you to my website. It'll take you to all the social medias, all that kind of stuff. So it's all available through my website. But yeah, it's things are around on the web to find if you're curious at all.
Perfect. Well, I want to say a big thank you for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Pleasure's entirely mine. I really appreciate you having me. I appreciate you spreading the word. I appreciate being passionate about music and willing to talk to me about it, because clearly that's all I care about. My whole life is and thinking about going to rock concerts and collecting vinyl. That's what I've been doing my whole life. So this has been a real pleasure.
Pig's feet and potted meat. Pig's feet and potted meat. Pig's feet and potted meat. Pig's feet and potted meat.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, why not reach out and let us know? You can find us on all social media, just search for Concerts That Made Us Podcast. And also, be sure to check out our website at www.concertsthatmadeus.com. That's the best place to stay up to date on everything that is Concerts That Made Us. Until next week, keep rocking.